Whether any of these are true, I have no idea. $3 trillion in sales in about 3 or 4 years out. That's a lot of money. A lot of job opportunities there. As I said, startups in the first version or two may not be big business for us as testers, but if those things start being in the marketplace, it will be. I've heard 10 to 1,000 billion devices somewhere in the next 10 years. I don't even know what those numbers mean. We had to go to IPv6 to have enough internet addresses for all these things. So supposedly we're good for another 50 years. Of course, they said that about IPv4 about 20 years ago when the internet first came out. There'll be software in everything, and I mean software in everything. I've heard all kinds of schemes for putting software in almost everything. And we'll be buried in data, literally, I think, on this. So, for me, it's all about that bass, and I forgot to have my recording. There's a U.S. song about, all about the bass, pop song. But it's really about the database. We're going to have these massive databases out there of data. And we're going to have to figure out ways to mine this stuff, which is what this section is coming up on. And you as testers, both in the mobile space as you move into that, and in the IoT space, I think you're going to have to figure out these data. And that histogram circle represents data also, if you think about it. It started out over here in mainframes, the big iron world that I started out. It was kind of like a priesthood of those of us in it that knew how to access computers and program. We had access to the data. Basically, nobody else did. It was a little small club, and there wasn't that much data out there. Certainly wasn't anything called the internet, those kind of things. And then the PC came along, and all of a sudden, I set my mom up on her first PC like in 1983, something like that. And that was a novel thing to have a small business with a PC. But now all small businesses have PCs. All homes have PCs. Everybody, I'll call it in the civilized world, walks around with a smartphone, which is a computer. The access to the data has grown. The embedded side was very much different. A lot of embedded devices had no communication. We built them, we put them in the car, and we never heard back from the car on what it was doing unless there was something bad going on. So the embedded people, the world I worked in, we kind of had this, went over the wall, unless something really bad happened, we assumed all was good. We got no data feedback from the software in any kind of sense. There are a few devices certainly that had communication links, but most didn't. Then the mobile smartphone revolution happened, and all of a sudden, not just a few people that had PCs, but now you have all the people, well, not all the people on the planet, but because they now say there's as many smartphones and cellular phones as there are people on the planet. But that's because, like, some of us have 5 or 6 of the things. So there's a lot of double dipping going on. But there's an awful lot of these things. We all access data with them, right? We, constantly, get on Google or check maps or download data. I mean, it's just kind of the way life is. I was in Tokyo a few months ago, got lost walking around Tokyo because I'm not a big city person. I'm living in the wilderness person. And I don't speak Japanese, but I was able to get on my phone and say, okay, where's my location? And then I typed in the address of my hotel and I said, take me there. And it just walked me right there. And I didn't have to ask anybody. And I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I could see going around the world and never getting lost now. But is that true? Anybody found bugs in their map applications? I have, because I live in a very strange place. We've had several people till we got, I think it was actually Apple Maps to correct it. They would show up looking for some hot springs at my road, which is about 2 miles from the hot spring. Very lost. And if you knew where I lived, you'd know how lost they really were. And so we can't trust the data, but we use it and trust it nonetheless. IoT, we're still figuring out what that's going to mean in terms of data and types of data. We know it's probably going to be a lot. It's all connected. They're going to be able to load everything and put it out in the cloud. I'm going to give you some recommendations of what I think we can do with it. I think we can use it for testing. I think we can use data coming out of helps, social media, those kinds of things. So where do we find data now? Any thoughts? Where do you find data now to help you test? Anybody have test logs? Come on, some of you must have test logs. I know it's scary to talk. Okay. We have test logs. We have test reports. That's where a lot of us start in the IT world, those kinds of things. If we got databases, we can record things off into those. Anybody have the error reports that you file? We're going to talk about those in a minute, but that's a source of data. But then you go to sensors. Anybody know what telemetry is? Telemetry is the fancy name for these data streams. You have these sensors, you have these IoT devices, your mobile phone. It's generating all this information. We're starting to take that, pipe that out into the cellular system to the cloud and record it all. The cloud is great because you just keep expanding and recording everything, and the data stays there forever, doesn't it? Which I would not have survived as a college kid to adulthood properly in the new world because there were embarrassing things I did. I didn't have that problem. Now today's kids, like everything's recorded and Snapchatted, and I wouldn't like that at all. But it's there forever. We can record these kind of actions and field data. That's good, but then we've got to do something with it. So, anybody analyzing any of their data? Just show of hands, please. Nobody. Anybody ever analyze their error reports? But we're going to look at how to do that. Because that's the starting point that I'm going to recommend. And these are little simple things. Yes, I know it's not big data, neural network, AI, but you got to start somewhere on simple things before you can get to something like neural network, good data with Watson. Sorry, you got to start small and certain things, and collect the right kinds of data. So the data comes from that we're going to be looking at from your test activities. It comes from your devices. And you can use this data both to help you test now, but more importantly, to help you test better in the future. And that is test-driven data analytics, some might call it. We can do it with the DevOps world as you move into that, where we're going to be getting these data streams. And my guess would be somewhere in the near future on IoT, there'll be testers sitting there, and 3, 4, 5, maybe more times a day, they'll get little pop-ups that go, this data detected that doesn't look right, you need to do some test investigation, figure out what's going on. And that'll kick off a development cycle and a testing cycle. I can see that coming. Will we get more time? Probably not. Will we get more budget? Probably not. We'll have to figure out how to do these things in our existing time frames and schedules and things like that. And I'll give you some ideas. So, Whitaker, and then I followed on with this work, came up with the notion of an attack. It's really a pattern, probably not a good choice of names, but it's a pattern. Now, humans are very good at spotting patterns. Anybody ever looked up in the sky and seen a bunny rabbit in the clouds? I see some people smiling. Is there really a bunny rabbit in the clouds? No. Your mind is pre-programmed to see that pattern. Anybody know why you're pre-programmed to see that pattern? This was really important for the native Malays that used to live here in Malaysia a long time ago. You used to have tigers here, didn't you? Well, it was a really good advantage if instead of the clouds you were looking into the jungle and your brain picked out that there was a tiger there, so you started running before your best friend started running. Why? Because the tiger gets the best friend. Maybe no longer your best friend. But it was a genetic advantage for you to spot patterns and very difficult things to spot patterns. The human brain is very good at doing that. We are also now very good at spotting test patterns. This is what a lot of senior testers end up having and doing, because I experienced these people, and I would say, how did you know to do that? What prompted you to do that during your testing? And the person would go, I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing to do. They had a pattern, because they'd been there, similar situation before in testing, and they realized they could find out information if they did something, like run away from the tiger. So we target these things after certain kinds of errors, bugs, but if you look at Whitaker's book and my book, there's other patterns that we target. Things that maybe aren't bugs at all, but just useful information to have, say like timing information. Lee Copeland, another author, talks about these things in his book. So it's been around in the literature for a while, but an awful lot of testers just confine themselves to testing requirements. I advocate that you should test requirements and maybe some patterns and try and get, maybe 2 errors with 1 stone on these things. And so a pattern, nice name, but it's not a cookbook. People, when they hear me talking about patterns in Whitaker, they go, oh, that's a test procedure. A test procedure is a cookbook. Gives you how much to do, what to do, when to do it. That's what a cookbook does. Do this, do that, bake it 450 degrees, and you've got a cake. That's a test procedure. Patterns are different. Because patterns you have to take, you have to modify to turn it into an automated test, or a scripted test, or even an exploratory test. And the analogy I would give you, anybody ever use patterns to make like clothes or dress? Probably not, it's a lost art, I know. But maybe your mothers did. But you take this paper pattern and you lay it down over a piece of cloth, but then you have to customize it for the person's size and weight and those kind of things. And the patterns have all these little lines and you cut out around it and sew it together and you've got a dress. Lost art, I know, but that's really what a pattern in the software is. It's something that you got to cut out, address, change. Then you've got a test script. And as I said, testers learn these mental models so that they can become Jedi testers. And yes, I know some people said, are you saying testers are lab rats? No. But I did call some of my test teams that I ran who lived in the labs a lot. I did, with affection in my heart, call them my lab rats because they were always in there running tests. But they're good guys. So these patterns, largely aimed at bugs, that just appeared up there with a bug, but they do other things, and we'll hit some of those. We will look at patterns and pattern recognition here in a moment. I mentioned my book. I came up with 33 patterns and some sub-patterns on how to find certain kinds of information, certain kinds of tests. If you add mine in with Whitaker's, I think he had 20-some in his first book. He had a book on breaking software security. I think there was another 25 or 30 in there. And then his other book on web systems had like 40. So between his books and my books, we've got somewhere 120, 130 of these patterns kind of defined. Some of them very similar, certainly. But there's a fair number of these things out there that as testers, I personally think we should have in our repertoire of approaches and techniques to do better testing. People sometimes ask me, why were you a good tester and a good manager? Well, my short answer there, secret to some of my success, is I had a lot of books. I still have 2 bookcases that are about 3 meters by about 2 meters, filled with nothing but technical books. That's a lot of books. The other thing I got really good at was Google. And so I would get a question from somebody, they'd call up and, how do we do this? How do we test this? And I'd go, I'm a little busy right now, let me get back to you. And I'd go off and I'd read my books and look things up, and I'd Google and I'd write it up, and I'd send them an email, and they were like, wow, you know all this stuff. No, I just know how to look things up.